Well, sometimes.
So if it's a robin, does everyone know? It's kind of a well-made cup, and then the inside is perfectly formed with mud. And it's so fascinating because they will go and they will collect mud with bits of grass and stems, and they'll just use it as a wick and scoop up the mud, take it to the nest, plaster it in place,
That's amazing.
and then they take their breast, stick it down in a nest, and go like this.
But only humans use tools.
What do they do? They do this.
Ask a hummingbird question?
Yes.
You were saying about the hummingbirds eating.
Yeah.
Well, I've noticed the hummingbirds have like the straw that comes out of their beak.
Mm-hmm.
So what, do they just pull in that insect through that straw?
No, in that case, that's the drinking. That's their tongue for drinking. So they don't use their tongue for catching insects. They just grab insects.
Oh, they have two different.
Yeah.
I've just seen that. It's like a clear straw they stick in.
That's the tongue for drinking. And it's actually, if you do a cross section of it, it's curled up like this, and it makes a little capillary action. Just drinking nectar out of a flower.
What, curled on the sides like that?
Yeah, it's curled up and curled in.
Kind of like a U.
Well, like a tube of, like a map that's rolled up, and then you can roll it so the two sides come in. That's how the tongue is.
Hummingbird tongue's cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
But then they have beaks that they just eat.
Yeah, and then they can just, that needle-like beak is just for snapping little flying insects out of the air.
I didn't know that.
A lot of birds that have-
than nectar. That's interesting.
So nectar is just like it's just like belling up to the coffee bar. You know, it's just go juice. It's just you know how the metabolism is just supercharged, and it's the sugar that keeps it going.
So what's the beak like? Is it just one piece?
No, it's two.
That's just opens up, yeah. One of the neat things that hummingbirds do is you know that's a tiny little bird, right? Tiny little brain. And they have this incredible metabolism. I don't know what their heart rate is. It's
120 beats per minute, I'm pretty sure.
think so? Okay, and their wing beats even faster,
Yes,
and it's
it
just
is.
an incredible amount of energy that they're pumping out. And when they hover in front of a flower, that takes a tremendous amount of energy, right? Hover in front of a flower, like that little wing. Actually, they're going like this with their wings. And it's a tremendous amount of energy. And they cannot afford to hover in front of a flower and get that tiny fraction of a droplet of nectar and move to the next flower. If they hover in front of a flower and use all the energy and the flower is dry, like it's already been sipped dry, you know, you take a sip of a flower and it's empty, and then you have to wait like half a day or a day for that nectar to fill up again. So the hummingbird on its territory knows all the flowers, it knows how recently it's visited
Which
each
one
flower,
it's into.
what the recharge rate is, which flowers are coming into season, which ones are
Whoa.
not. It's thousands of calculations and maintaining some sort of knowledge of that fabric of flowers.
And that itty bitty bird brain.
That little tiny bird brain is
Yeah,
doing
that's
some
ingenious.
amazing things all at once. And one of the really cool strategies that the males do, first thing he does when he wakes up in the morning, goes around the perimeter of his territory and drinks all the flowers dry, and then sits in the center of the territory, which of course is centered around the best, most productive patch of flowers, and guards that for the rest of the day.
So what's that chasing? Is that playing or is that fighting?
Hummingbirds don't play. Does anyone have a hummingbird feeder up?
Yeah, it's like, get
Does
out
the
of my
male ever let
pantry.
anyone else drink?
No.
No.
So
Yeah.
David, I've seen them like, I thought they were like going to the flower and it's like they're, next, and they kind of like are sampling. Are you saying that they're that fast at drinking?
Yeah, there's not much stuff there.
Because it's like
tiny.
almost like they just hum around, they look at it and they go, oh no, and I always thought
There
they were
might be
like,
some of that going on, but each flower has a tiny bit of nectar.
so they're just like
So
boom.
it's probably a couple
That's why they
licks, and they
love.
move on a couple licks.
Oh, I thought they were just like looking and,
Oh.
Yeah, no, they can't afford to do that.
So,
Too much of energy to.
So,
So
if there's... Go ahead.
if I'm seeing one come up to the feeder and allow another one there, is that
They're
its mate?
girls?
No.
They're
They
girls?
that's the thing that's so amazing. The male is so vociferous about protecting the food source that he will even attack and even kill his mate.
No, but I mean,
Because
I've
he won't let anyone
seen two.
come.
I've seen two on my feeder before
Yes.
simultaneously.
Does that
so
mean
what's
they're
their
girls?
relationship?
It could be this time of year. There's a lot of babies out, and they're just like dorky and kind of like, "Ooh, I don't know what I'm supposed to do." And also the males, and the male will defend vigorously through the day, and then in the late into the day, you'll see all the birds sitting at the feeders all at once.
Yeah.
And it's like at that point, it's the end of the day. The flower's gonna have all night to recharge. The male doesn't waste energy fighting thing, and then you see a lot of cooperation in that cooperation. It's the wrong word for hummingbirds.
Tolerance.
Toleration.
Well, 'cause they have to
No.
replace several times their body
No.
weight in a day. So.
Yes,
There are
exactly.
certain species of hummingbirds that will actually hibernate and go down to like almost no heartbeat whatsoever. In the
Most of them.
Andes or something, or way up
Well,
there.
even here, yes.
When it's really
We have
cold.
Anna's hummingbirds here, and in the winter, they start breeding in January when there's snow on the ground. I mean, I've seen them nesting and courting in January with 2 feet of snow on the ground, or whatever. And so, how do they find food then? It's
But could you
remarkable.
talk about the migration aspect?
Yes,
'Cause
that's another thing. Is
amazing.
so here you have a bird that needs to
Incredible.
eat probably every 10 minutes or so, constantly eating, and they migrate like
500 miles across the
yeah, it's like
Gulf of
50
Mexico.
hours or something across the Gulf of Mexico without eating.
I think it's
Yeah.
18 hours. They
It's
do it
18
in
hours.
one night. They do
One
it at
night.
night, they leave, they top up, get themselves full of food, and then they just fly, was it 500 miles or something? In 18 hours, they get across the Gulf of Mexico, do some more, and then they keep going.
Yeah.
I
Is
think
this
that's
in
the
a
most
flock or they're
amazing
just
thing.
individually
No, it is
taking
totally
off?
By
individual, yeah.
themselves.
So this is remarkable that a bird that has to eat that much can actually go do that such a sustained flight. And they have the longest migration of any animal relative to body length. It's like 4.5 million body lengths they migrate with that. Yeah.
David,
I've watched a hummingbird in some areas around my house going up to spider webs.
Yes.
Are they getting insects?
Well, either insects out of the spider web, because there's a lot of small insects that get trapped in spider webs. Spiders don't bother with the small insects. They only want the big juicy things.
You're kidding.
So there's a lot of the little stuff in the web.
Leftovers.
Leftovers that just get incidental bycatch, or what do we call it? Is that what it's called? Bycatch.
hi,
It's a technical spider term. Or they're collecting spider web to make their nest. They make their nest out of spider webs.
Oh,
And a spider web is a
yeah.
perfect thing to make a nest out of, because it's very sticky and it's very stretchy and very strong. So they make a sweet little thimble-shaped little nest, weave lichens into it, so it's perfectly camouflaged. Like the bark of all these trees is covered with lichens, right? We weave some of the bits of that in there. You cannot see that nest at all. You put 2 little eggs in there that are the size of a pea, and but when the chicks leave, they're the size of the adult, and the nest, as the chicks grow, expands around them, and they just
Sort
stretch.
of elastic, kind of?
Yeah, it's stretchy. That's spider web, so it stretches out and accommodates the growing babies. So it's really remarkable.
How important are the little insects they get as a food source to them?
Well, it's where well, the sugars, carbohydrates, which is energy to go. Insects is proteins, so amino acids development. So
Do they get half of their calories from insects, or do we know?
I don't know. Someone knows. So adults,
Well, that's
pretty
what
much,
itty-bitty insects
answer
are
your
for.
question, part of it is that adults only need carbohydrates, because that's the maintenance fuel for adults. That's the fuel of life is carbohydrates, sugars. What did we have for breakfast?
Sugar.
Sugars and carbohydrates, right? That's all we have for breakfast. Just a little bit of protein. So that's kind of what the hummingbirds are eating.
Oil and fat.
That same ratio. Yeah, and a little bit of oil and fat. Babies need protein. They need all protein because they're growing. So, and that relates to another fascinating story that you see around here a lot. Is that when you have yellow jackets coming to your picnics, what are they coming for?
Your meat.
So why do the yellow
Wait,
jackets
the
come for
story
protein?
Oh.
To feed their babies?
Because they're feeding their babies, right? And so during the summer, they have a big hive, usually in the ground. They're feeding their babies like crazy. And the babies need all that protein for growing. So the adults are coming and stealing meat. We call them meat beads, right? But they're yellow jackets. Yes, exactly. They're vociferous, carrying off chunks of meat. And then the babies are excreting a little droplet of nectar, honeydew. They're pooping it out, right, like aphids. And the adults are drinking that for their sugars, because the adults need food.
Babies
Adults don't need
that?
proteins; they just need sugars or carbohydrates, right, to keep themselves going, right? So the baby, like aphids, are pooping out little sugar droplets. That's what the baby yellow jackets are doing.
Whoa.
And then later in the summer, all those little baby yellow jackets go into the pupa stage and are in cocoons, and are not pooping out sugar anymore. So what are the adults desperate for then? Sugar. So what are they coming to your picnics for in late summer? Your soda pops, your cakes.
Oh my gosh. Wow.